rock it like it's two.
There we go. That's all live. Let's just fix up the chat very quickly. And how's everyone doing this morning? I know I'm a few seconds late. Okay, maybe 2 whole minutes. But on the whole, we're here. We're on time. It's all jazzed and sorted. There we go. There we go. Oh, it's still a bit blown out behind me, isn't it? I should I sort that out? Let's see if we can sort that out very quickly. How's everyone's day been going? How has everyone's day been going? I hope you have a really, really lovely day. Exposure and... Oh. Go. Has that sorted itself out? No. I'm gonna pop that in the middle there, and you know what we'll do is we'll just, yeah, it really doesn't like this exposure, does it? Ooh. There we go. It's probably because I'm wearing black. It's fine. It's 100% A-okay. I have been having a wonderful time. You will notice there's a little bit of progress. What that is because we were watching a movie last night. And I love to do a bit of cross-stitch on the sofa while we watch something. The movie we're watching is something from 2003, which I suppose now is considered an old movie. Oh, that's still piping hot. That is still piping hot. But it totally passed me by. And it was called Jennifer's Body. Jennifer's Body, I think. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. It's a horror comedy. It's got, I'm terrible with names. The girl from the I shouldn't say girl. I mean, God, she's my age. No, she's a bit younger than me. I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure she's a bit younger than me. Anyway, woman, from the Transformers franchise. I probably said girl because in the Transformers franchise she is treated as a girl. But it's also got a female director, and holy shit, you always forget the difference that a female director makes. I mean, you don't forget, but it's easy to forget. You know, it's just one of those things, like, people talk about, you know, more female characters or whatever, but really, diversity behind the camera, or diversity behind the scenes, in leadership and in shot calling positions, holy hell does it make difference. Because, like, you know, it's a fun, really awesome horror film. There's, I'd say there's only really one sexy scene in it. Which is, considering it's about a demonic possession and about, you know, eating people, like the demon chomps on people. But before doing that, like, the demon is possessing the body of the hot cheerleader, and she uses sex to lure in her victims. So given that premise with, I think, a male director, a lot of those, what's the best word I'm looking for? A lot of those predatory scenes would be played up as sexy. And because it's a female director, that's just not the case. Like, don't get me wrong, she is being sexy in those scenes, but we as the audience aren't being titillated in any way. We as the audience are like, oh fuck, this guy's gonna get munched. And the only, in any way, erotic's actually the wrong word. The only passionate scene is between the two titular female leads, or protagonist and antagonist, I would say. And even then, just how it's treated, the camera work, the whole piece is just significantly different to standard Hollywood fare. And it was really interesting because Ducky was like, oh, I hadn't seen this movie, but she had seen a music video. And we watched the music video. Now, the music video has some original footage in it, but it's using a lot of clips from the movie. The way in which it uses the clips from the movie, however, and just the few seconds it selects and how it selects them, it makes it look like a sex-crazed movie, and it casts it with, I think, the light you would have, it casts it in a way I think you would have expected a male director to cast it. And it's so interesting, the subtle shift in tone that having a female director gave that film. Sadly, the film bombed, and I think we know why. It's a really good film, but I think the film bombed because, for these films to succeed, not only do they have to be good films, but they have to be believed in, and they have to be supported by the marketing department and by various other people in the studio system and such like that. And I think because it didn't appeal to the stereotypical male approach to these things, and then because it was schlock horror rather than art house, it didn't pull in the diversity snobs, those art snobs who are like, yes, we want diverse voices and stuff, but they should all be making tragic stories about how hard it is to be gay and how hard it is to be a woman and how hard it is to be a person of colour and whatever. They can't have any positive celebratory pieces that don't focus on their diversity. The whole reason we want them is a diversity hire. God forbid they should write sci-fi or horror or, have fun with it. It's one of my pet peeves. It's one of my pet peeves. It's like, no, I'm sorry. I just want to have fun. And it was one of my pet peeves growing up in South Africa because so much of South Africa theatre and so much of South African entertainment is trauma theatre is probably not the right word. For some of it, it definitely is, but a lot of it was to do with the struggles of being South African, or the uniqueness of South Africa, and it took someone like Bloomkamp to come across years ago, and he really tapped into a pent-up frustration, I feel, in a lot of South African creatives to make a story. I mean, even then he had to go with like the racism and the apartheid angle and all that stuff. But uniquely, the thing that he was actually doing was to make it a fun sci-fi story. Yes, there we go. I think first and foremost, District... God, what is it? District 9? I forget because it's actually based on a historic... like the naming is based on an apartheid thing. Anyway, the District movie. You know the one I'm talking about. Brains blanked. while it has the subtext and all of the feedback into that stuff is really driven by cool sci-fi shit, and Elysium as well, you know, like really, really solid. Morning. How you doing this morning? But yeah, so I do like it when creators of different backgrounds can just have fun making the stuff they want to make. And yeah, Jennifer's Body, really, really solid film. Don't know how I missed it when it came out. Sad it didn't do better, but it's on Disney Plus now. So if you have Disney Plus, it's an easy watch. You know, it is by no means a seminal masterpiece or anything. District 9, yeah, bro. Fucking. I hate that there's like the stereotypical South African accent, because there's actually quite a few South African accents. You can always have like the fuck's sake, man. It's like so hard to like be a poppy. Poppy was the South African word for bimbo back in the day. Don't know if it still is. But you know, South Africa, like any country, has a lot of accents. But I think that Free State, the mercenary. Oh God, it's I hate it. I hate it so much. But it's become the stereotypical South African accent. It's one of those things. One of those things. Yeah. I'm terrible with accents. You know, I could always tell Scottish and Irish accents apart when I moved to the UK. But for a while, I kept on forgetting which was which. So it's like, if a Scotsman and an Irishman spoke to me, I would like, one of you Scottish and one of you was Irish. I just need to remember which one is which. And now I know. But when I first moved to the UK, I would occasionally muck it up. And fortunately, it's a muck up that most people kind of laugh at. It's not like, it's not like confusing someone. The regional accent thing is funny. The more similar two groups of people are, the more upset they are for being confused. So like, if there are two towns separated by a river, or if there's two countries that to the rest of the world are broadly the same, like Australia, New Zealand, or, you know, Australia, South Africa, or whatever, then people get upset when the accents get mixed up. But if they're not regionally or culturally very similar, people don't seem to mind as much. It's funny. It's funny how that works. Because there's definitely some psychology of some description going on there. I am not qualified to dissect it. And there, cool. Brains. Yeah, I'm not qualified to dissect it. Yeah, I was thinking yesterday about camera methodologies that could focus and zoom in on the area of interest. The problem is that unless it's a head-mounted camera, which is always a possibility, unless it's a head-mounted camera, the reality is that the action moves around and happens in strange places, so it's a tricky one. But I think this largely works. I think this largely captures it. Could maybe be a bit more zoomed in, but it's one of those tough ones because I think if you did zoom in, I think you'd want to be at the top of the frame. I do worry that the cross stitch is sometimes not fully caught if you're actually... Yeah, there we go. Interested in that. And I hope you are, because I really enjoy doing it. And I feel like I've really leveled up the cross stitch on this stuff. I really do feel like I've leveled it up. Like, I feel by the time this piece is ended, I really want to do embroidery or something else, because I feel like this piece will be, hey, cross stitch accomplished. You know? Though I was thinking to myself, maybe I should get out my paints, and I've got a coloured canvas that has been bare for a few years that I've been meaning to paint on, and I've had a few different ideas, and I just haven't had the room to start. And I was like, oh, maybe that's the next little project I dust off, because I've also got to have one project that's not in any way associated with the computer. You know, not a typing project or a coding project or any of that schlep. It's one of the reasons why occasionally I like to do some DIY around the house, or speaking of which, we need to finish painting those pumpkins. Because we're doing a housewarming and a Halloween party combination. Me and my wife made pumpkins. Posted those to the Discord. They look lovely, but they need painting. They need a slicker paint. There we go. I'm in that lovely flow stage where the needle's just sort of running along and the back stitch is behaving and everything's kind of just working, and I really like it when the sewing is like this, because it just feels really super clean. Super clean, yo. There's a distance that or a length, sorry, of thread that this works at. It's funny because as you stitch, your length is changing, and so it goes from too long to perfect to too short. And there's that period when you're just in the perfect zone, and you're like, I wanted to stay in this zone. But it can't. That's not how physics works. Which is fine. That is fine. So yeah. No. I was considering doing editing this morning, because I really do need to put some editing time in. But my brain had not woken up by the time I was ready to push the start streaming button. So it's like, okay, cross stitch, get your hands to wake you up. But I'm going to have to put in some time tonight on that, I think. If there's any chance of me meeting my Thursday deadline. I like my Thursday deadline. It works well for me. It works well for me. Yeah. Yeah. You got it. You got it. Whoops. You don't got it. I don't know why, but my brain did a very silly thing. There we go. There we go. My brain drifted for a second there. It's just in a full-on Tokyo drift going, wow. What are you doing? There we go. it's hard not to obsess over how good the backstitch looks at the moment. And I'm like, I'm gonna have to do some stuff to make the stitch hold, and just to make sure I use the stitch optimally. And when I do that, I'm going to be very upset with myself because the backstitch is going to look less good. But that's fine. It's the natural process. Just feels so good when the backstitch looks clean like that. I think it's the biggest thing I've noticed as I've sort of leveled up on cross stitch is just how smooth I can get it and how organized the back stitch is. Come on, nice and clean. We're going to get a clean finisher on this. Okay, I think we're coming towards the end of the thread. I'm like, how far do I run my luck? It's about to run out, I think. One more square. One more square. Let's see if we can get it. That one more is always a push. It's always a push. Here we go. Nice, and I am 100% absorbed into the stitch. Clean. Oh yeah, there's definitely not enough there for a last stitch. Now I just need to pick this up and cement it. But yeah, I'm gonna have to put in time to get the edit done today. I'm working on some code at work that is it's one of those chunky areas. It's not super satisfying either, but it also is time sensitive because I'm blocking someone at the moment, so stressing me out a bit, yeah. Stressing me out. I don't know why I'm going into my South African accent a lot today. It's not even my South African accent, it's parody of my South African accent. My South African accent it's never been like that. Because I was in a toolkit with received pronunciation and articulate English, and rather proud of it. And my Afrikaans was always a bit stilted. It wasn't until I went to university in Pretoria, actually, that my Afrikaans got anywhere near legible, understandable. Yeah, University of Pretoria had a really interesting policy that some say stemmed from racism, others say stemmed from practicality, others say stemmed from things. I mostly believe it's racism. Ooh. Oh. But the policy was that every lecture was offered in English and Afrikaans, and or at least for the undergrad course. And if there was a scheduling conflict, sorry, man, I need to get my seat. If there was a scheduling conflict, but you were able to attend the Afrikaans lecture, then you there was no scheduling conflict. You just had to attend the Afrikaans lecture. And this meant that if you got unlucky in your scheduling, you had to do wiskunde or some other Afrikaans variant of a subject. And I always remember maths the most. That's what wiskunde is, by the way. Because most languages, when you do math, because math is filled with Latin, it's filled with Greek terms, and yes, a lot of English terms. But most languages, they don't change the math words when doing math because, well, they're not insecure about their language. But Afrikaans is small enough that they have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder sometimes about some things. And so rather than allowing students to use English or Latin or Greek words or whatever, every bloody thing had an Afrikaans word. And if you spoke to Afrikaans mathematicians, like proper mathematicians, they wouldn't use the Afrikaans word. They would use the internationally recognized word because they had to speak to their peers and their colleagues. But when it came to high school and undergrad math and primary school math and whatever, you better bloody believe they were China about it. They were not happy if you did not use the approved language. That's what oppressive regimes do. It's what oppressive regimes do. But yeah, it did mean there was some really funny muck-ups. But it wasn't even that got my Afrikaans really good. Afrikaans got a lot better, mostly because Pretoria itself is a lot more Afrikaans, and because I started sleeping with a lot more Afrikaans people. Spider on the shirt spooked you. Spider on the shirt, this shirt is a charity shirt that was bought because, don't know if you, well, I actually don't know what country you're in, but in the UK, with the whole Brexit mess, there was a vital point and there was a vital ruling given by our version of the Supreme Court, basically, but we call it the High Court. And the justice who gave, again, I'm terrible with names, I apologize. The justice who gave the ruling, who read the ruling, who's badass, wore a spider brooch when she gave it. Don't know if there was any significance to the spider brooch. I might have known at the time, I can't remember, but it was a little bit of a symbol that a lot of us locked onto. And social media did its thing, and within an hour of, maybe 2 hours, within an hour of her announcement, on the same day of the announcement where she gave the ruling or whatever, and she gave this really kick-ass, destroy the fucking Tories speech. Not, she wasn't anti-Tory, because, she's a justice, she's neutral, whatever. She was just so disgusted with Boris's complete lack of form and appreciation of standard and law that, let us just say that the ruling was rather scathing. And this became a nice little nod, nice little symbol. And yeah, as I say, the shirts, some places had come up with shirt designs very quickly, and this particular place, I'm trying to remember the name of it, and I can't because names are my kryptonite, but it was a Brighton-based, because of course it was. Brighton is like our Portland. It was a Brighton-based shirt company, and all proceeds were going to refugee and immigrant assistance, if I recall. That was a charity, I believe so. And so yeah, I immediately bought one, and I had a good chuckle because I've worn it in a certain company, and I can always see when someone recognizes it because it's just, but it's subtle. It's super subtle. It's like a real deep cut. you've got to, you probably would have to have been watching like Brexit pretty hard and probably attending the marches and like all that kind of stuff to actually get the reference, or just have a really good memory. But yeah, it was a particular kind of thing. This was the closest one, and it's also got like a sparkly glitter finish, which because it was obviously a metal brooch. I actually also own a metal spider brooch designed after hers as well. I don't wear it as often because I'm not a big brooch person, but I have worn it. I have worn it at, shall we say, sensitive occasions, like where it's like it would be a faux pas to make a political statement, but I'm going to make a subtle political statement. I adore the subtle flex of society. It's just, and I was never fully comfortable in that whole like world. I was just too queer and too poor to be fully comfortable in it. But there are some parts of it I really, really miss. And one of them is just the pure ownage that only privilege, time, and a sense of moneyed taste can really exert. It's just this sick nature to the burn that is subtle and civilized that I adore. I miss it sometimes. I do wonder sometimes if I hadn't upset everyone and been all gay and shit. If I had gone down the stereotypical route, and oh my word, funny, different world, a different reality. It's hard to play it's hard not to play the what if game, but at the same time I don't think it's necessarily healthy. It's amusing sometimes. It is amusing sometimes. But it's also, I have to admit, like, these days it's fine. These days it's easy, because these days I'm doing okay. But there were times when I was really fucking struggling financially. And I'm like, would it have been nice if I just actually exercised my privilege correctly and swallowed my tongue and stayed on that golden teat. Yeah, there are times. I'll also say, like, nothing has given me more conviction than the fact that I have gone through that roller coaster and I stuck to my guns. And yeah, it's good. Like, my most defining moment in my video game career was when I tore up a contract with Ubisoft after they did some really shady shit. And I put myself heavily in debt. And I mean heavily in debt. Because I had to move country, I had to pay for the move twice because I lost my signing bonus, I lost my relocation bonus. It was not pleasant. But it was probably my proudest moment in my career, tearing that contract up. Because it was like, I want to make video games, but I also have morals. And I know where my line is, and it's here. And it was such a moment of growth. It was such a I cannot express how much of a, like, warm fuzzy memory that is for me, of just like You were faced with a moral dilemma, and you successfully picked the right answer, even at great personal cost and strife. Feels good, you know? Because you never know. You never know. And it wasn't like I was unfamiliar with strife. Do you know what the scary thing is? If I hadn't been homeless before, if I hadn't been absolutely broke before, I don't think I would have had the confidence and courage to make a call. The fact that I had been at the bottom of the barrel before, I think, and I had lost it all before, kind of gave me the strength, I think, to make that decision. It was also, I mean, to be fair, like, I was also very privileged that the only person's life I was fucking up was myself. You know, I remember a similar situation earlier in my life where I didn't make the right call. That was my first video game studio, and I won't spare you the full details, but basically, long story short, the company tried to screw over a lot of employees with standardizations of contracts and some shit and shady shit. And I, in my naivete, read through the contract and was like, okay, here's the 5 main points or whatever it was. Let me draw up a simple spreadsheet, print out a little form, and I literally go around and I will ask a person to write their name, tick which of the 5 clauses or parts of the thing they had an issue with, and then sign. Right? And collective organizing of labor, I did not think through. I didn't seek legal advice. I didn't seek anyone's opinion or whatever, which if I had done any of that, I would have been fucking golden and I would have been protected and shit. But I did it in the naive, trusting, let's work this out with them way. And it ended up with me in a room, not only having my job threatened, but then, and your mother works here. And honestly, that broke me. Because I was prepared to burn down my job for this because I believed in it. I mean, I didn't think I would need to because I thought this was just a misunderstanding and it was clear we just had to work these things out. Oh, naive Claire. Have you not learned about capitalism? But no. But they immediately went for the jugular. They didn't say, we will fire your mum. It's like, think about your mum, she works here too. It's like, I mean, it was about as subtle as a fucking dump truck. It had none of the elegance of the societal burn I was just talking about. But, message was received loud and clear. And the worst part is I couldn't even tell my mum at the time. I told her years later. Because ironically, if I had told my mum at the time, and I think I knew this, which is probably why I didn't tell her, she would have been like, fuck them, and just walked out. She would have not. But I mean, that's why they got me in a room alone, you know, because, as I say, if I had any kind of lawyer with me, if I had any kind of representation, if I had anyone on my side in the room, that tactic never would have flown. But because I was all alone, and I was a naive, stupid little person, they broke it out. Yeah. But yeah, that was the time I didn't make the right call. And I didn't make the right call because, as I say, someone else was involved. So I have a lot of sympathy for when people make tough calls like that and they've got kids or they've got family or whatever, and it's like, it's one thing to fuck your life over, it's totally another to fuck over the lives of those people you love. Companies also know this, by the way, which is why for a lot of very senior positions they really like to get married people. There's a few other reasons as well. Stability, and it's harder for the person to up and leave at a moment's notice because, you know, chances are they'll have to move their kids and stuff and So there's other reasons for very senior positions that they're like married, stable people. And then there's the old societal prejudice bullshit. Not women, mind, men, married men. Oh no, you're a family woman, that's going to really destroy your career prospects. But another reason is because they know that people are more likely to swallow shit if they're swallowing it on behalf of people they love, rather than just themselves. If it's just themselves, then people can be glorious martyrs, heroes. Yeah, people can manage that, but it is harder when you have dependents. It's one of those things. But anyway, the good news is that the moment I did tear up that contract was a very, very positive moment in my life. Because I also distinctly remember coming back to the UK. I managed to get my old flat back, thankfully. It hadn't been rented out to someone else. But it was around this time of year. No, it was Decemberish, because it was the Ludum Dare in December. It was really cold, yeah, because it was December. And I didn't have any of my stuff because it was all with the movers, the very expensive movers that had been hired on a company salary, and then had to be rehired because and repaid again because I couldn't change moving company because they had my stuff. Anyway, I remember sitting alone, cold in the flat with a Chromebook and a bag that was only really meant to last me like 2-3 days. But ended up lasting me 2 weeks because of turning the movers around and doing stuff and all kinds of mess. But I remember being cold and on that floor and working on a Ludum Dare game entirely in JavaScript because that was the only thing I could do on the Chromebook, because this was before you had thingy and whatnot, and the only internet I had was tethered on my phone, and the only heat I had was from a small electric heater because I didn't have any proper blankets or bedding. I was sleeping on the floor, and it wasn't the hardest I've slept, but it was the hardest I'd slept in a while, because I had, as I say, I've slept rough. But that was a moment of just utter clarity. I fucking love video games. I always make video games, but I will not. I have a line, and I will not cross it. And it was a good feeling. It was a really, really good feeling. It was a moment of just like satisfaction. Good feeling. Cause it's nice to have principles, and it's even nicer to stand by them. How did we get into this thing? Because weren't we talking about Jennifer's body, and we were talking about how the hell did we get into this particular avenue? It's not even anything chat said, because I'm looking at chat and I'm like, oh, spider on the shirt. Spider on the shirt. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, a spider on the shirt. I will always, in my soul, be a little bit punk. And I don't mean punk the music movement or whatever. I mean punk in the cultural sense of the word. Because I think it's hard not to be politically active and a bit punk when the system has shat on you from on a high. Once it's like a dog, right? if your only experience of the system has been police officers being kind to you, and the law's never gone after you in a big way, and you've never been on the wrong side of the power struggle, you like the dog. The dog is sweet. But that dog just needs to bite you once, and you never forget it. You never feel safe around that dog again. And it bites you a few times, and you really start to hate dogs. It's just a thing. I shouldn't cast poor doggos in such a negative light, because it's not doggo's fault. I'm just using it as an allegory. But yeah, it's one of those things I think that inherently push you into counterculture. I mean, my first exposure to counterculture was through nerddom, because by being a nerd, you're inherently, you used to be inherently counterculture. I don't know if that's still true these days, given how, socially acceptable nerds are and stuff. But growing up, when I grew up, nerds were not cool. Nerdy girls even less so. And then being gay was the next whole thing. And then when that leads you down to make some other decisions and do some other shit, get more... Basically, there's a push-pull. Once you cross a certain threshold, society basically says, fuck you, you're a deviant. Now you're an enemy of the state. Or rather, an enemy of the heteronormative status quo. Or the, thing. And then once you're in that bucket, it is very hard to get out of it, because you've now, as I say, been on the other side of the fence. You've seen the sharp end of the stick, and you just build up this inherent distrust of authority. And I've read that it has happened to abused kids and stuff as well. And it's like, once you have witnessed a pattern of abuse from authority figures, then you're basically just never ever going to play nice with authority again. It's one of those things. You know how so much of this shit is just like baked into your brain, especially when you're a kid and especially when you're young. So yeah, once you've seen that authority abuse, then you people have different reactions to it, people have different reactions to it. You got the hippie, all love the world kind of reaction. You've got the libertarian, I don't really want action and self-isolation thing. But then you've also got like the punk, fight the system kind of approach and stuff. And I think it's really interesting to see what escape valve your particular brain chooses, because we can talk about free will and such, but a lot of this is environmental. A lot of this is like, what were you exposed to? What was seen as your plausible outlets at the time, And I definitely fell into the punk bucket. I definitely fell into the, I'm not in the libertarian bucket at all, because I'm a bloody bleeding heart socialist. I'm more close to the hippie bucket than I am anything else other than punk. But the hippie bucket is a bit too, how do I say this? People who got the real sharp end of the stick don't tend to end up in the hippie bucket. The hippie bucket requires a certain level of middle class, it requires you to be on the wrong end of the authority, but not to be properly wrecked by it, you know, not have the sink or swim, fight or flight moments. Tends to be from more sort of progressive wearing down. I think there's a reason why the hippie phenomenon, I mean, it's been there throughout history. I mean, dreads and certain non-violent pacifist sects throughout history, you know, like it was not invented in the 60s, but it has definitely raised in popularity as a movement in the modern era. I think that's just because the modern era is more likely to be a slow wear down. Yeah. I suppose that's an interesting question, is how much of what is the difference between the punk ethos and the separatist ethos? Which is an interesting, or the revolutionary ethos, I suppose you could call it. Probably in the sense that, like, to be a revolutionary or to be a separatist, you still have to have faith in similar power structures. Probably the difference. You know, because if your solution to the problems you experience with particular authority are to set up a second authority, then you inherently still believe in that source of authority or in that system, which is interesting. Because I am practical, you know. I'd be, you know, for my political ends and stuff, I'm willing to make compromises and work on that stuff. It's not like I'm impractical. In fact, I'm radically practical on a lot of this stuff. But then I think the other thing that really helped shape this is growing up in I don't want to say in the shadow of apartheid, in the aftermath of apartheid. Because even though apartheid was firmly in swing when I was born, I don't have much conscious memory of it. And I was very much what they called the rainbow generation. Because by 1990, you know, when I'm starting to like be able to think and string sentences together and all that shit, you know, it wasn't over, but it was like none of the huge riots and crazy stuff had happened yet and whatnot. So for me, the end of apartheid was a hopeful time. You know, it was a like, oh, we're through it. We need to figure out what the future is. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of stuff to figure it all out, and people worried about the country falling apart or whatever. But you know, when you're a kid, you're a lot more hopeful about things. And you believe in the new Rainbow Nation, and yeah, so they called my generation the Rainbow Generation. But at the same time, you know, there was such a raw exposure to the levels of power, in the sense of between Zimbabwe and South Africa, my youth was, especially because I had family who had fought on the wrong side of independence, and had fought on the British side. I mean, fuck Mugabe. Mugabe was a fucking monster, but you know, I don't think he always was. I think there was syphilis and other shit that happened there. But yeah, God, some horrible stuff there. But when you've seen the violent independence of a nation, and then you've seen or rather, I didn't see the violent independence of the nation, but my family had, because there was a lot of stories around that, and there was a lot of shared memory around that. But then and very recent and fresh, you know, like my brother, family story about my brother taking the dog for a walk early in the morning in a minefield and not realizing it. And then MPs bringing my brother back to my mum at like crazy o'clock in the morning because they'd found him walking the dog in an active minefield. So, you know, you got like shit like that in your family, but then, you know, you've also got like the Rainbow Nation and the first ever peaceful transition of power in recorded human history. Like South Africa was unprecedented, like truly unprecedented. It was quite special. Yeah, not enough people know that. It's one of those things the world did not think it would work, and it did work. And yeah, South Africa's got its problems, still does. But hey, it did okay. It's doing okay. And if you look at any of the other nations who had violent transitions of power or other things, they did not do any better. So South Africa on the whole is doing better than I think a lot of people expected. But yeah, when you see that, and you see where the levers of power are, and you see like your family talking about planes and weapons, and you go to barbecues where you see white supremacists, and you know the language they talk. Yeah. You know, it didn't register with me as a kid. Not really. I didn't see the signs because stuff's insidious. But, yeah. My brain had internalized a lot of it, and yeah, just realizing just how important certain power structures are to moving things along, and just realizing just how much of this is people tend to think of these things in the macro, but then they don't tend to think of them in macro enough terms, because what you really need to think is you either need to think at the level of the individual or you need to think at the level of society. You can't think about small groups. It just doesn't work. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look at it at the micro level, you begin to understand that a lot of these people, their frustrations and stuff, like, they might not even necessarily be racist. They're just concerned about their business, or they're concerned about whatever, and that leads them towards racism. You know, to have some other gateway issue. And that pulls there. And, you know, they might even have a black friend or two, or whatever, all this stuff. And it's not just racism, it's just any kind of political movement. But they, for very personal and specific and understandable reasons to them as an individual that are very complex, they have aligned themselves with this group. And then people try to figure out the group as a small group, and that's where it doesn't work out. But then if you zoom further out and you look at macroeconomic trends and incentive models, and like you stop treating people as people, you treat them as ants with really simple brains, because that's how statistical modeling and all this stuff works. On the whole, when you zoom out, you can do much more reliable predictions. There's that old thing about army rationing and how much food do you need to feed an army. And I forget who it was. I think it might have been Napoleon. It might have been someone else in the Napoleonic era, but it was roughly that era. But some general or some strategist or whatever basically said, this is how many calories you need to feed an army. I don't know if they used calories, but they were like, this much. They didn't actually. There was like this much meat, this much potato, or whatever. And they were very specific amounts. And basically people call bullshit, because they're like, yeah, but some days I'm more hungry, and some days I'm less hungry, and some days the army as a whole has marched harder, and some days they've marched less, whatever. And he basically like, that is all true. But if your army is big enough, and you are operating at a campaign scale, like over time you zoom out, these numbers hold true. Basically, if you lose the Brownian noise of the individual, the fuzz of the day-to-day, the statistical average is a very solid and predictable number. And so that's a good way to approach a lot of this big scary stuff that's sometimes very hard to predict. And it's why we can project like a heat front or a cold front or whatever in meteorological terms a week in advance. But it's very hard to tell how that'll manifest in the micro. It's zooming out that gives you this ability to go further into the future or to examine things more deeply. But only more deeply at scale. It doesn't give you resolution, it gives you colour, so to speak. But then, if you want to zoom in, you're almost better served by zooming into the individual level. That middle ground is just too fuzzy, because then you're like, well, I can't treat these people as ants because they're too detailed for that, and I can't treat them as individuals because there's too many of them for that. It's like, I either need to zoom in or zoom out. That's why so much stuff looks unique to people, because they're too zoomed in or not zoomed in enough. It's like when you look at narratives, it's like you zoom out enough, every narrative is like person meets person, falls in love, or it's like is exposed to some weird shit, goes on a journey, finds stuff about themselves, returns to normality, or whatever. Like there's these huge broad arching things. And then there's like the scene-to-scene, moment-to-moment stuff where it's like, oh, I've seen this scene play out or whatever. And really the interesting thing is that combination, that middle ground, where there's what seems like endless variety. And the truth is that more of society thought at, if we broadened or narrowed our scope or whatever, it would affect our art, and it would affect how much the Brownian noise spills out into different levels. Because, we need that mixture of familiarity and diversity. And if we as a society were thinking at a different scale, like, then our art would change, because our frame of reference had changed. Our frame of considering had changed. And that would make us more interested in stories and entertainment that operated at what we consider the natural scope of considering. And then to spot trends, you would have to zoom further out or zoom further in. I know it sounds overly simplistic, but that's kind of the point. That is kind of the point. Needle point. I always struggle what category to put these morning videos in. I personally would like them to be more educational, and so which is why I put them in the how-to section. I'd love us to actually just talk more about cross-stitch on this stuff. But that requires that people want to know what I'm doing here, right? Or that I have interesting things to say about my current project. So then I fall into this natural parlance for me of rummaging through my head and pulling out what's on top. And what's on top tends to be of a certain nature of topic. Is what it is. Claire Brain and Claire Brain operate like this, yo. Okay, don't have enough to finish that patch. That's going to be a smallish patch to finish. But that is good. That is good. We've run 8 minutes over. That's fine though. I wanted to really finish this thread. I'm going to leave that to be... oh shit. I shouldn't have cut that. I should have just left that attached, but screw it. I'm going to have to secure that at some point. Because I didn't secure that stitch. That's fine. Oh, yes. Right. So, there is the entire piece at the moment. So the progress we've had is on that dark brown there. And just sort of filling in. And this, I'm particularly happy with this. If you look at the neatness of that back stitch there. I'm very happy with how that back stitch has come out. It's coming out nicely. It's coming out nicely. There we go. That being said, folks, I will see you tomorrow. I don't know if we'll do cross stitch tomorrow editing because I'm really concerned that I haven't put enough time into my edit this week. So let's see how it goes. Till then, take care of yourselves, everyone. And yeah, I hope you have put that hour into your project. I don't care what project it is, but just an hour today. Take an hour. Okay. Ta-ta.
Rock it like you so.